I was walking back to my hotel room when a maid suddenly stopped me and whispered, "Sir, please don't open your door yet." I asked her why, but she kept looking over her shoulder. Then she said, "I cleaned that room this morning, and I found something your wife didn't want you to see." She handed. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The porch light on Fenwick Lane came on at exactly 7 every evening, because Owen Brandt had wired it that way 11 years ago and never once let it fail. He liked things that worked, gutters that drained, doors that closed without a shove, a marriage that held. 14 years with Vivian. 14 winters of scraping her windshield before his own. 14 summers of grilling on a patio he had poured himself, one bag of concrete at a time, on weekends when the sun cooked the back of his neck red. Their neighborhood sat 20 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio. Quiet streets, basketball hoops over garage doors. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew the Brandts. To the people on that street, Owen and Vivian were the couple you pointed at when your own marriage got hard. Vivian made sure of that. She remembered birthdays. Not just the close friends. The mailman. The woman 2 doors down who never spoke to anyone. Vivian remembered them all, and she wrote the cards by hand, and she signed them from both of us. When Doug Halvorson across the street had his surgery, Vivian brought a casserole over 3 nights in a row, still warm, wrapped in a dish towel, so it wouldn't burn her fingers. She volunteered at the middle school book fair, even though they had no children. She stayed late to fold the tables. And whenever anyone asked about Owen, her face changed. Softened. Lit. "My husband works harder than anyone I know," she would say, and she would touch his arm while she said it. "I honestly don't know what I'd do without him." People loved hearing her say it. Owen watched their faces when she did. Something in them relaxed, like the world had proved itself decent for a minute. He used to love hearing it too. Their marriage had not always been easy. He never pretended otherwise. There had been the 2 years in the apartment off Sullivan Avenue, when the radiator clanked all night and the rent ate everything. There had been the move to Dayton for a job that lasted 11 months, and then the move back. There had been the winter Vivian cried at the kitchen table because the car needed a transmission, and they had $400. Owen had taken a second job that winter. Nights at a warehouse, loading trucks until his shoulders locked. He came home at 4 in the morning smelling like cardboard and diesel and slept 3 hours and went to his real job. He never told her how bad it got. He didn't want her carrying it. He believed those years had welded them together. He believed hard seasons made people permanent. That was the part he thought about later. Not the betrayal. The believing. Because somewhere in the last year, something in the house had shifted, and Owen had spent months telling himself he was imagining it. It started with her phone. Vivian had never cared about her phone. She left it face up on the counter for a decade. She let it buzz through dinner and ignored it. Then, sometime around the previous spring, the phone started living face down. Then it started living in her pocket. Then it started coming into the bathroom with her, and coming out again, and the shower would run, and he would hear nothing else. Owen noticed. He noticed the way a man notices a sound in his engine. Small. Wrong. Easy to ignore if you turn up the radio. Then came the weekends. A conference in Cleveland with no name. A friend from college who needed help moving, though Vivian came home with clean hands and a fresh manicure. A spa trip she booked alone and described afterward in 3 flat sentences. Owen asked about the Cleveland weekend once. Just once. He asked it gently, standing at the sink with a plate in his hand, water running over his knuckles. What was the conference for exactly? The silence behind him lasted 2 seconds too long. Then Vivian's chair scraped. "Wow," she said. He turned around. Her eyes were already wet. That was the thing about Vivian. She never had to work up to it. 14 years, she said. Her voice cracked in the middle, right on the word years. 14 years, Owen. I've never given you one single reason. Not one. And you're standing there looking at me like I'm a suspect. I just asked what it was. No. She shook her head slowly. You asked where I really was. Say what you actually mean. Viv, do you honestly think I would betray you? After everything we built out of nothing? Her hand went flat against her chest. After I sat in that apartment eating cereal for dinner so you could keep your pride? He set the plate down. The water was still running. He remembered that detail forever, the sound of it, wasteful and loud. I'm sorry, he said. He crossed the kitchen. He put his arms around her. She let him, stiffly at first, then softened, then cried into his shirt for a while, and he stood there apologizing into her hair for a question he had every right to ask. That was how Vivian handled him. She never shouted. Shouting would have been a fight, and a fight had two sides. Instead, she made the asking itself the crime. She made him the man who could suspect a woman like her. And Owen, who had built his whole idea of himself around being decent, could not stand being that man. So he stopped asking. Not all at once. It happened the way a driveway cracks. One line, then another, then one spring you look down, and it's a map of something broken. By that fall, Owen had a private list in his head of questions he was not allowed to ask, and he had never once said the list out loud, not even to himself. He worked. He came home. He fixed the porch light when it flickered. And on the street, Vivian kept smiling and kept telling everyone how lucky she was, and everyone kept believing her, including him. That was the part that would take the longest to forgive. Not her lying, his believing. She brought it up on a Tuesday, over leftover chicken, in the same voice she used for grocery lists. I booked us a place for the anniversary. Owen looked up. You did. Lake Michigan. 2 nights. This little hotel up past the dunes. Vivian pushed rice around her plate. It's quiet. There's a pier. That's a long drive. I know. She set her fork down. When she looked at him, her eyes were steady and tired, and something in them looked almost sad. Owen, we've turned into strangers who share a mortgage. I hate it. I want 2 days where we're not that. He felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in months. He said yes before he finished swallowing. They drove up on a Friday. 6 hours with the windows cracked, the flat brown fields of northern Ohio rolling by, then Indiana, then the air turning cooler and wetter and carrying that particular smell that means big water somewhere ahead. Vivian sang along to the radio. She hadn't done that in a year. She rested her hand on his thigh at a red light in Michigan City and left it there. Owen kept glancing at her. He kept thinking, it's coming back. The hotel sat on a low bluff, 3 stories of white clapboard with green shutters and a wraparound porch full of rocking chairs. Behind it, the lake went out forever, gray-blue and restless, throwing a cold wind up the slope that smelled like wet stone. Inside, the lobby was warm, old wood floors that creaked in a friendly way, a fireplace with real logs. Somewhere down a hall, a vacuum was running. At the desk, Vivian leaned into him while the clerk typed. It's our anniversary, she said. 14 years. The clerk smiled. Congratulations. He's the best husband in the world. Vivian squeezed Owen's arm. I mean that. Ask anybody who knows us. Owen laughed, embarrassed, and the clerk laughed, and for a moment it was exactly what it looked like. She was warmer that whole first day than she had been since spring. She held his hand walking down to the water. She let the cold spray hit her shoes and swore and laughed about it. At dinner she asked him about work and actually listened, and when he told the story about his foreman falling asleep in the break room, she laughed hard enough to press a napkin to her eyes. Owen went to bed that night thinking he had gotten his wife back. The second evening broke it. They were in the room. Vivian was on the bed with her shoes off, scrolling. Owen came out of the bathroom, drying his hands, and glanced over. No thought behind it at all. He saw a piece of the screen, 2 lines of a message, and he saw her name at the top of it, and the name above hers. The phone flipped face down against the quilt so fast it made a slap. Neither of them moved for a second. Who was that? Owen said. My sister. He nodded slowly. The towel was still in his hands. Her sister Bree had flown to Arizona 9 days ago for a work rotation. Vivian had complained about it at the time. Vivian had said, out loud, in their kitchen, that Bree wouldn't have signal half the time. Owen said nothing. He watched his wife's face and saw her waiting to find out whether she had gotten away with it. He saw her decide that she had. He saw her shoulders come down half an inch. You okay? She said. Long drive yesterday. You should sleep. She stretched, elaborate, theatrical. God, I'm exhausted. I think it's the air out here. She turned off the lamp on her side. Owen stood in the dark for a moment. His pulse was going hard in his neck, and his face felt hot, and none of it showed. I'm going to walk, he said. Get some air. She said into the pillow. He put on his jacket and went out. The hallway was dim and smelled like carpet cleaner. Down at the far end, an ice machine dropped a load and rattled. Owen walked past closed doors, past a window where the lake had gone black and only showed itself by the white edges of waves. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was thinking about Bree in Arizona. He was thinking about the slap of the phone on the quilt. He was thinking about a warehouse in the winter of their second year, and how he had never told her about the diesel and the cardboard and the 3 hours of sleep. He got to the stairwell landing and stopped and put both hands on the rail and breathed. Sir. He turned. A young woman stood a few feet down the hall in a hotel uniform, a cart of towels parked behind her. 25, maybe. Dark hair pulled back tight. She had her hands folded in front of her, and she was holding them too still, the way people do when they're trying not to shake. Sorry, Owen said. Am I in your way? No. She glanced past him toward the stairs. Then back. Sir, please don't go back to your room yet. Owen straightened. Why? She wet her lips. I cleaned that room this morning, she said. Room 212. You and your wife. Okay. She looked down the hall again, both directions, and stepped closer, and lowered her voice until he had to lean in to hear her over the wind pushing at the window glass. I found something in there, she said, and I've been sick about it all day. I think you need to see it. Her name was Nora Vega. She told him that in the stairwell, on the landing between the second and first floors, where the light was bad and nobody came. I've worked here 2 years, she said. I've never done anything like this. I want you to know that. I don't go through people's things. I believe you. I was changing the liner in the trash. She had her arms crossed tight over herself now. There was an envelope. It wasn't sealed. It fell open in my hand, and I read maybe 6 words before I understood what it was, and then I couldn't stop reading. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled it out. A plain white envelope, creased, slightly damp at one corner. I should have called the police, Nora said. I almost did, and then I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if it's a story she's writing? What if I ruined somebody's life over nothing? And then I saw you at breakfast. What about breakfast? Her jaw moved. You poured her coffee before you poured your own, she said. And I decided you should be the one to see it. Owen took the envelope. The paper inside was hotel stationery, folded in 3. The handwriting hit him before the words did. Vivian's hand. He'd know it in a stack of 100. That hard forward slant. The capital B she made like a lowercase b with an extra loop. The way she'd written it on 14 years of grocery lists and school forms, and the note she left on the fridge the morning of their wedding that just said, "Don't be late." He read it once. The stairwell was very quiet. He read it again. It wasn't a love letter. There was nothing in it about longing or missing anyone. It was flat and organized, and it used the word plan twice. It talked about after. It talked about how it needed to look. It said the word accident. It said people had to believe he had made a stupid mistake. And it said that was the easy part because everyone already knew how tired he'd been. His name was in it. Owen. In her handwriting. In a sentence about how much simpler things would be. His hands went cold. Not shaking. Cold from the fingertips in, like he'd been holding metal outdoors. He became aware of small things. The hum of the exit sign above him. The faint chlorine smell drifting up from the pool level. The fact that he was still holding the paper very carefully by the edges. And that some part of him had known to do that without being told. There's more, Nora said quietly. Owen looked up. In the bathroom. In her bag on the counter. She swallowed. There was a bottle of sleeping pills. Prescription, but not in her name that I could see. And there was another container. Not a medicine bottle. It had a warning label on it. The kind with the symbols. What kind of symbols? The kind that mean don't swallow this, Nora said. Owen folded the letter along its own creases and slid it back into the envelope. He didn't feel rage yet. That surprised him later. What he felt was a strange, terrible clarity like a window being washed. 14 years snapped into a new shape in about 4 seconds. The face-down phone. The weekend trips. The tears in the kitchen that arrived on cue. 2 days of her holding his hand and telling a desk clerk he was the best husband in the world. She hadn't been repairing anything. She had been getting him relaxed. Nora, his voice came out level. I have to ask you something, and I need the truth. Okay. Have you seen my wife with another man? Here? Nora didn't hesitate. She nodded. Yesterday afternoon, she said. Out on the side porch, past the ice machines, where the smokers go. I was carrying linens past the window. She was with a man. They weren't talking like friends. How were they talking? He had his hand on the back of her neck, Nora said. Owen looked at the wall for a moment. Do you know his name? He's a guest. He checked in Thursday, one night before you. She glanced at the stairs again. I saw the registry when I picked up my sheet. Kessler. Grant Kessler. Owen closed his eyes. Grant Kessler, who Vivian had known since college. Grant, who sent her a birthday text every single year and signed it with an old nickname. Grant, who Owen had met exactly twice and disliked both times for reasons he could never justify out loud. He remembered a barbecue 4 summers back. Grant standing by the cooler in a golf shirt, laughing too easily. Owen had said something afterward, careful, half joking. Vivian had rolled her eyes and called him ridiculous. He's harmless, she'd said. He's practically my brother. And Owen had let it go because that was what a decent man did. He had let it go the way he had let everything go. He opened his eyes. Nora, he said, how much trouble does this get you in? She gave a short, unhappy laugh. If she finds out, or if the manager finds out, I'm done. Probably the same day. Then here's what happens. Owen's voice stayed low and even. You go finish your shift. You don't tell anyone. Not your supervisor. Not your friend at the desk. Nobody. If I need you, I'll come to you. And I won't do it where anyone can see. You're not going up there to fight with her. No, Owen said. I'm not going up there to do anything at all. Nora studied him. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it, and it seemed to scare her a little. You should be shaking, she said. I know. He put the envelope inside his jacket, flat against his chest, and buttoned it. Above him, 2 floors up, his wife was lying in the dark with the lake wind against the window, waiting for him to come back and fall asleep beside her. The first thing Owen wanted to do was go upstairs. He wanted to turn on every light in the room. He wanted to hold the letter up and watch her face while she read her own handwriting back to herself. He wanted to hear her try. He stood in that stairwell for a long time and did not move, because he knew exactly how it would go. She would sit up. She would blink at the light. She would look at the paper, and her chin would start to tremble before she'd read a full line. And she would say, Owen, where did you get that? And she would be crying by the second sentence. Then she would find the angle. She always found the angle. Someone put that in our room. Someone is trying to hurt us. Why were you going through my things? Have you been following me? Who told you to look? Do you hear yourself right now? And then, sometime around 2 in the morning, she would call his mother. That was the part that stopped him cold. Owen had watched Vivian do this to other people for 14 years. He had watched her turn a neighbor dispute over a fence line into a story where she was the one wronged. He had watched her cry at a Thanksgiving table until his own aunt apologized for something Vivian started. If he went up those stairs tonight with nothing but a piece of paper and a shaking voice, by Monday he would be the unstable husband who found some letter and started making wild accusations. She would say it kindly. That was the worst part. She would say it with tears in her eyes and her hand over her heart, and people would nod, and they would look at Owen differently forever. He had one advantage in the entire world right now, and it was this. She did not know that he knew. He was not going to spend it on the satisfaction of a scene. Owen went down the last flight, out a side door, and around to the parking lot. The wind came off the lake hard enough to make his eyes water. He sat in his truck with the door shut and the dome light off and put his forehead against the steering wheel for exactly 10 seconds. Then he sat up and took out his phone. Raymond Alcott had handled Owen's uncle's estate 6 years back. Careful man. 60-something. The kind of lawyer who read a document twice before he said a word about it. He answered on the 4th ring at 11:40 at night, sounding like he'd been asleep. Owen? Everything all right? No. Owen said. I need you to listen to something and then tell me what to do next, and I need you to not tell me to calm down. There was a rustle on the other end. A lamp clicking on. Go ahead. Owen told him. He kept his voice flat, and he went in order because he'd already figured out that flat and in order was going to be his whole strategy from here forward. The trip, the phone, the maid, the envelope, the handwriting, the bottle in the bathroom bag, the name Grant Kessler. Alcott didn't interrupt once. When Owen finished, there were a few seconds of nothing. Where is the letter right now? Inside my jacket. Are you in the room? I'm in my truck. Good. Stay out of that room tonight if you can. Get a second room if there's one available, and pay for it yourself. Alcott's voice had lost every trace of sleep. Owen, listen to me carefully. You are not going to touch that bottle. You are not going to open her bag. You are not going to take anything else out of that bathroom. Why not? It's evidence. It's evidence if the police collect it. It's a headache if you do. A pause. The second you handle it, her lawyer gets to stand up someday and say you planted it. Don't hand her that. Don't hand her anything. Owen looked out the windshield at the dark shape of the hotel. One lit window on the second floor, and the rest black. So, what do I do? Tonight? Nothing but this. Photograph the letter, front and back, flat, good light, in your truck. Email the photos to me and to yourself so they're time-stamped. Write down everything the housekeeper told you tonight, while it's exact. Her name, her shift, what she saw, what time, where. Memory rots fast, and defense attorneys know it. And then in the morning we call the police in that county, and I make some calls of my own, Alcott said. The hotel will have records. Registration, key card entries, cameras in the lobby and the corridors. Cameras get overwritten in a week or two at these places. We ask them to hold it before anybody thinks to be helpful to the wrong person. Owen wrote it all down on the back of a gas receipt with a pen from the glove box. One more thing, Alcott said. This is the hard one. Say it. When you go back inside that hotel, and every day after, you're going to have to be normal to her. Owen's grip tightened on the pen. How long? Days. Maybe a couple of weeks. Long enough for the records to be preserved and for people with badges to do their jobs. Alcott's voice softened, only slightly. Owen, I've been doing this 30 years. Men in your position lose because they can't hold it in for 72 hours. They explode, and the explosion becomes the story. Don't be the story. Owen looked at the lit window again. I can hold it, he said. He got a room on the first floor, told the night clerk his wife was a light sleeper, and he snored, and slept 4 hours on top of the covers with his jacket folded under his head. At 6 in the morning, in gray light, he laid the letter flat on the truck's tailgate and photographed every inch of it. He sent the pictures to Alcott. He wrote out Nora's account word for word, dated it, and sent that too. Then he went back inside and ordered 2 coffees, and carried them up to room 212, and knocked on his own door like a man bringing his wife breakfast. He didn't feel like a victim anymore. He felt like a man with a job to do. She opened the door in his old college t-shirt with her hair flattened on one side. Where were you? She said. I woke up at 2, and you weren't here. Couldn't sleep. Owen held out the coffee. Ended up talking to the night guy at the desk about the Buckeyes for an hour. Then I dozed off in one of those lobby chairs like an old man. He watched her decide whether to buy it. You're going to wreck your back, she said, and took the cup. She sat on the end of the unmade bed and drank, knees together, both hands around it. The room smelled like her hairspray and the lake. Her bag was on the bathroom counter, exactly where Nora said. He did not look at it. I was worried, Vivian said. I'm fine. You've been weird since yesterday. There it was. Owen sat down in the chair by the window and stretched his legs out, casual, like a man with nothing in his chest but coffee. I've been tired, he said. Work's been ugly. Half the crew's out, and they're still asking for the same numbers. She was watching his face, not his eyes. His whole face, the way you watch a gauge. This was the thing he had never let himself see clearly before, and now that he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Vivian didn't just lie. Any coward could lie. Vivian read. She sat across from a person and took a reading, and then she became whatever that reading called for. If you were angry, she got small and wounded, and you ended up comforting her. If you doubted her, she got vulnerable, and doubting a vulnerable person feels like cruelty. If you defended her, she got grateful, warm, generous, and you would defend her again next time and harder. And if you cried in front of her, she cried too, faster and louder, until it was her grief in the room and not yours. He had seen her do that at her own uncle's funeral. He had thought at the time that she just felt things deeply. "You tell me, right?" Vivian said. "If something was wrong." "Of course." She set her coffee on the nightstand and came over and sat on the arm of his chair and put her arm around his shoulders. "I hate that we drove all this way and you can't relax," she said. "I planned this so you could relax." Owen let her hold him. His skin crawled. There is no other honest way to say it. Her arm was warm across the back of his neck, familiar, the weight of it as known to him as his own hands, and every nerve in his body wanted to be somewhere else on earth. He thought, 9 feet away, in that bag is the second thing. He thought, you wrote it down. You sat somewhere with a pen, and you thought about the wording. He put his hand on her knee. "It's a good trip," he said. "Thank you for booking it." She kissed the top of his head. "See," she said, "this is what I wanted. Just this." They drove home that afternoon. 6 hours. She fell asleep for 2 of them with her cheek against the seatbelt and her mouth slightly open. And Owen drove 70 miles an hour down I-69 with his wife sleeping trustfully beside him and the photographs of her handwriting sitting in an attorney's inbox. He looked over at her once at a rest stop outside Fort Wayne while she slept. He tried to find the woman from the apartment on Sullivan Avenue, the one who ate cereal for dinner, the one who cried about the transmission and then laughed about it 2 weeks later. He couldn't find her, not because she was gone, because he was no longer sure she had ever been there. The next 11 days were the hardest work Owen had ever done. He got up. He made the coffee. He kissed her cheek on the way out the door. He came home and ate at the same table and asked about her day and listened to the answers and said in the right places. He mowed the lawn on Saturday. He fixed the wobble in the kitchen chair she'd been complaining about since March. He sat through a movie with her feet in his lap. And every night, after she went up, he stood in the garage with the door down and the light off and let his hands shake for 10 minutes. And then he stopped and went to bed. He met the county detective in a diner parking lot on a Tuesday, on his lunch hour, and handed over the original envelope in a sandwich bag. He gave a statement in a small room with a recorder running and did not embellish one word. When the detective asked him what he wanted out of this, Owen said, "I want it to be true or not true. Then I'll know what I'm doing." Nora gave her statement that same week, on her day off, driving 40 minutes to do it. Owen never once raised his voice in his own house. He learned something in those 11 days that he never lost. Rage is loud because it's weak. It shouts because it can't do anything else. What he had now was quieter, and it did not need to shout, and it was not going to stop. His mother found out because his mother always found out. Ellen Brandt had lived in the same house in Whitehall for 41 years and knew more about Owen's life than he ever told her. She called on a Thursday evening and skipped hello. "Are you and Vivian having trouble?" Owen stood in his driveway with the phone against his ear and a bag of groceries in his other hand. "Who told you that?" "Doris said Vivian's car has been gone a lot. And Vivian didn't come to the church thing on Sunday, and she never misses that." A pause. "And you sound like a man carrying something." "Mom." "Owen." He set the groceries on the hood of the truck. "It's complicated," he said. "It's always complicated. That's not an answer." "I know." His mother's voice went from curious to protective in one sentence, and he heard exactly which side she landed on. "That girl loves you," she said. "You know that, don't you?" Owen closed his eyes. "Mom, you don't know everything. I know what I've watched for 14 years. The line crackled. "Do you remember when your father was dying? Do you remember who sat in that hospital room overnight, so I could sleep? It wasn't your cousins. It was Vivian." She held his hand, and she read to him from the paper because he liked the sports page. Owen remembered. That was the trouble. It was all real. Vivian had done that. She had sat up 3 nights in a plastic chair with his father's hand in hers. You cannot explain to a person like his mother that both things can be true. That a woman can hold a dying man's hand and also sit down a decade later with a pen and think through the wording of an accident. "I remember," Owen said. "Then don't tear apart a marriage over a suspicion. Whatever it is, you talk to her. You go to counseling. You do not do what your uncle did." Owen stood in the driveway and looked at his own porch light coming on. Right on time, 7 o'clock, because he had wired it that way. He almost told her. He got as far as opening his mouth. And then Olcott's voice came back to him, dry and steady on the phone at midnight. Don't be the story. The case was 11 days old. Nothing was filed. Nothing was proven. If he said the word poison to his mother tonight, she would be at his front door by 9, and Vivian would know by 9:15, and every record and message and photograph still sitting out there would start disappearing. "Okay, Mom," he said. "Okay, what?" "Okay. I hear you." He hung up and stood there a while with the groceries sweating on the hood. Vivian got to his mother 2 days later. He found out on Sunday, when Ellen called again, and this time she wasn't concerned. This time she was angry, and she was angry at him. "She called me crying, Owen." His mother's voice was tight and hard. "Crying so hard I could barely make out the words." "What did she say?" "She said she doesn't know why you suddenly hate her. She said you barely speak to her. She said you've been checking her phone, watching her, accusing her of things she hasn't done." Owen sat down slowly on the bottom step of his own staircase. "She said you've become paranoid," Ellen went on. "She said she's afraid of what's happening to you. She said she's scared she's losing you, and she doesn't understand what she did. And you believed her." She was sobbing. "Owen, that woman was falling apart on my kitchen phone." He looked at the wall. "Did she mention Grant Kessler?" "Who?" "Did she mention any names at all?" "She's not the type to throw names around. She was defending you, if you want to know the truth. She kept saying you're a good man, you're just going through something." Of course she was. That was the craft of it. She didn't attack him. She grieved him. She stood in front of his own mother and mourned the loss of a husband who was standing right there. "Mom," Owen said, "I need you to do one thing for me." "What?" "Wait." "Wait for what?" "Just wait," he said. 6 weeks. Don't decide anything about me for 6 weeks. His mother was quiet for a moment. "You're frightening me," she said. "I know." He hung up, and he sat on that step in the dark hallway with his phone in his hand, and upstairs he could hear the shower running. That was the night Owen understood the true shape of what he was up against. Vivian had not merely lied to him. Over 14 years, she had been quietly building a wall out of other people. Neighbors, church friends, his aunt, his cousins, his own mother, who had been handed to her one hospital night at a time. Every casserole, every birthday card, every hand held in a hospital room, all of it had also been construction work. He didn't think she had planned it that way from the start. He thought she had simply discovered young, that being adored made her safe, and had never stopped. So when the truth finally came, she wouldn't have to defend herself. 30 people would do it for her. Owen went out to the garage that night and stood in the dark and did not shake for 10 minutes. He didn't need to anymore. Something in him had finished changing. He thought about his mother's voice saying that girl loves you, and he thought, fine, let her have them. Let her have every one of them, because there was one thing Vivian had never learned to work on in all those years of learning to work on people. Paper doesn't cry. It came in pieces over 5 weeks the way real things do. Alcott called on a Wednesday with the first of it. "The hotel gave us the registration," he said. "Grant Kessler checked in Thursday night, one night before you two arrived. Room 226. Owen was sitting in his truck in the lot behind the plant, engine off. Same floor. Same hall. 7 doors down. Papers shifting. Key card log shows entries to 212 on Friday afternoon at 2:14 and Saturday at 1:37, both while you were logged as being off property with the car. And there's lobby camera footage. Nothing dramatic. They come in together at 1:20 Saturday. They stand near the fireplace for about 4 minutes. Doing what? Talking. She has her hand on his forearm the whole time. A pause. It won't win a case by itself. It ends the possibility of a coincidence, which is what matters. The messages came after that. Owen never saw the raw extraction. He saw what the investigators chose to read to him, in a beige room with a table between them, and he sat there with his hands flat on his knees and listened to his wife's voice come out of a stranger's mouth. Some of it was ordinary. Complaints about a coworker. A joke about a restaurant. Then it wasn't ordinary. There was a message about how much easier everything would be after. There was a message asking how long people usually wait before it looks strange. There was a message about his life insurance, in which Vivian had the number correct to the dollar. And there was one, sent at 11:52 on a Tuesday night while Owen was asleep in a bed 9 feet from her, in which she wrote that he had been so tired lately that nobody would even ask questions. The detective stopped reading and looked up. Do you need a minute? No, Owen said. Keep going. Then the handwriting analysis came back. The examiner had compared the letter against 11 samples. Check registers, a signed refinance document, a birthday card to Owen's mother, and a notebook of recipes she kept in a kitchen drawer. The report used careful, boring language. Significant similarity across all characteristics. No indication of simulation or disguise. Highly probable common authorship. Owen read it twice. Then he set it down and looked out the window for a while. Vivian's response to all of it was the thing he remembered longest. She learned about the investigation on a Monday. The knock came at 10 in the morning. Owen was not there. That was deliberate on Alcott's advice. By that afternoon, she had called him 9 times. He answered the 10th, in his truck, with a recorder running and his lawyer's number on the other line. I didn't write that, she said. No hello. Okay. Owen, I didn't write it. I swear on my mother. Okay. Somebody copied my handwriting. Her voice was climbing. That's a thing people do. That's a whole thing. Who would do that? Silence. Then quieter. Did you put it there? And that was the first turn. Say that again, Owen said. You've been strange for months. You've been distant and cold. And you disappeared that whole night at the hotel, and I have no idea where you actually were. A breath. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying somebody did, and you're the one who found it. I didn't find it. Then who? Ask yourself who else was in that room. She hung up. The next version arrived 3 days later, through her attorney. Perhaps Grant Kessler had written it, and had been fixated on Vivian for years, and she had been too kind to cut him off. The version after that, at a hearing, was that the letter was old, written during a dark period in her life when she was in a bad place emotionally and had never meant anything. 4 explanations. Each one contradicted the last. Each one delivered with the same total, unwavering conviction, as if the previous 3 had never existed. That was what unsettled the people around her. Not that she lied, that she never seemed to feel the seam between one lie and the next. And through all of it, she was winning outside the courthouse. She posted about betrayal. Not details, never details. Just soft, wounded lines about how the people closest to you can decide to destroy you, and how she was praying for strength, and how she never imagined her life would look like this at 41. The comments piled up. Praying for you. You're the strongest person I know. Whatever this is, you don't deserve it. Doris from across the street stopped waving at Owen. His cousin unfriended him. A man he'd known since high school sent him one message. I don't know what happened, but I hope you can live with yourself. Owen read it standing in his kitchen. Then he deleted it and put the phone face down on the counter. She could have the street. She could have the comment sections and the church and the sympathy casseroles. He had the key card log, the camera footage, the messages, and a handwriting report that said highly probable. She had spent her whole life learning how to win a room. She had never once had to win an argument that a room couldn't decide. He filed on a Thursday morning in October. The paperwork was served at her sister's house, where Vivian had been staying since the second week. Owen wasn't there for it. He heard about it 40 minutes later, when his phone lit up with her name and kept lighting up. He let it ring out 4 times. Then he drove to Bree's house himself, because Alcott had told him that if he was going to see her at all, better it happen once, in daylight, with a witness on the porch. Vivian came out before he reached the steps. Bree stood in the doorway behind her with her arms folded. You file. Vivian had the envelope in her hand. She held it up like proof of something. You filed, Owen. I did. Without one conversation. 14 years and you didn't even... Her voice broke correctly, on the right syllable. You didn't even fight for it. I don't want to spend another day married to you. She stared at him. He watched her run through the options. He could actually see it happen, now that he knew to look. Anger first tested and dropped, then hurt. You'll regret this, she said. No. You will. In a year, when you're alone in that house and there's nobody. I said no. Her jaw tightened. You're going to destroy this family. My mother is 73. Do you understand what this is going to do to her? To yours? You already did that. Owen. She came down 1 step. Her eyes filled. Right on schedule, and still, some animal part of him wanted to reach for her, and he hated that part and let it starve. I made mistakes. I know I did. I'm not standing here pretending I'm perfect. Mistakes. Yes. Mistakes. People make them. Marriages survive them. Her hands came out, open, pleading. I got lost. I got lonely and I got lost and I let something happen that never should have happened, and I have been sick about it every day since. Stop. And if you would just let me explain what I was going through, Vivian. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. An affair is a mistake. Writing down how your husband's death should look is a choice. The wind moved through the maple in Bree's yard. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and quit. For the first time in 14 years, Owen watched his wife open her mouth and find nothing in it. Bree's face had changed in the doorway. She was looking at the back of her sister's head. Viv, Bree said quietly. What is he talking about? Vivian didn't turn around. He's confused, she said. Owen was already walking back to his truck. You'll come back, she called after him. Louder now, less careful, the polish coming off. You always come back, Owen. You don't know how to be alone. You've never known how. He shut the door and started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. And in the mirror, she was still standing on the steps with the envelope in her hand. He drove 4 blocks and pulled over and sat there. He didn't cry. He waited for it. Honestly, he gave it a minute. It didn't come. What came instead was the strangest sensation he'd had in a year. He could breathe all the way to the bottom of his lungs. He hadn't noticed he'd stopped. The divorce turned ugly fast because Vivian understood one thing very clearly. Whatever happened in the criminal case, the divorce was still a room full of people, and rooms were where she lived. Her attorney was a polished woman from a downtown firm who spoke in a warm, reasonable voice, and the story she told was carefully built. This was a marriage, she said, that had been failing for years. Her client had been emotionally abandoned. Mr. Brandt worked constantly. He was withdrawn. He was cold. In the last year, he had become suspicious and controlling, monitoring her movements, questioning her friendships. My client is not perfect, the attorney said. She has acknowledged an affair. She is not the first lonely person in a long marriage to make that error. What she is not is a monster, and this proceeding is being used to paint her as one. Vivian sat very straight while it was said. She kept a tissue folded in her hand and never quite used it. She was good in that room. Owen would give her that forever. She cried in short bursts and stopped herself, which is far more convincing than crying freely. She looked at the judge when she answered. When she talked about the affair, she called it the worst thing she had ever done and let her voice fail on the word worst. Owen sat with his hands still and said nothing except when he was asked. Alcott did not argue emotion. He put paper on the table. The letter went first, enlarged, alongside the 11 handwriting samples. Then the examiner's report. Then the registration record for room 226. Then the key card log with the timestamps. Then 4 still frames from the lobby camera. Then the messages, read into the record in a flat voice by a man who had read 1,000 such messages and no longer changed his tone for any of them. Then Nora Vega took the stand. She wore a plain blue blouse, and she was visibly frightened, and she never wavered once. She said what she found. She said where she found it. She said what she saw on the side porch and how far away she was standing and what the light was like. When the other attorney asked her, twice, whether Owen had ever offered her anything, she said no both times, and the second time she added, he told me to finish my shift and not talk to anybody. That's all he ever asked me for. And through it all, Vivian's story kept moving. At an early hearing, she said she had never been alone with Grant Kessler. Then came a rental car agreement from March with both names on it, and a hotel folio from Cleveland in April. She said she had never discussed Owen's death with anyone. Then came the messages. She said the letter had been fabricated. Then came the examiner. She said the letter was hers but old, from a dark period years ago. Then someone pointed out that it was written on stationery from a hotel that had been renovated and rebranded 14 months earlier, and that the letterhead in her hand had not existed before then. Owen watched the judge's face change over 3 hearings. Not dramatically. Judges don't do dramatic. But there was a moment in the 3rd hearing when Vivian gave her 4th explanation, and the judge stopped writing and simply looked at her for a full 4 seconds before saying, "Go on." That was the sound of a room turning. Quiet and total. Afterward, in the hallway, Vivian caught his sleeve. "You're enjoying this," she said. Owen looked at her hand until she let go. "No," he said. "I'm not enjoying any part of this." And it was true. There was no pleasure in it. There was only the flat, level satisfaction of a thing finally being weighed correctly, after 14 years of nobody weighing anything at all. Grant Kessler broke in December. Owen heard it from Alcott first, in a voice that had a rare edge of something like disgust. Kessler's cooperating. Full statement. He's giving them everything. Why now? Because he finally read the room, Alcott said. He's been sitting there for 2 months waiting for her to protect him. She's been telling her attorney he was obsessed with her and that she was too soft-hearted to cut him off. It got back to him. That was that. Grant's statement was long and detailed and, in its way, pathetic. He admitted the affair. 2 years of it, which was longer than Owen had guessed. He described the Cleveland weekends and the rental car in March. He said Vivian had told him, repeatedly, that the marriage was already over in every way that mattered, and that Owen simply refused to see it. Then he got to the rest. He said the talk started as bitterness and turned into something else across the summer. He said she brought it up more often than he did. He said she talked about how tired Owen always looked, and how nobody would be surprised, and how the insurance would settle everything cleanly. He said he told her she was talking crazy. He said he didn't stop her. He said the words at that hotel that he'd hoped to never say out loud. And then he asked, through his own lawyer, whether it might help to speak with Mr. Brandt directly. Alcott brought that request to Owen in a conference room with bad fluorescent lights. He wants to apologize, Alcott said. Personally. He's asking for a meeting. No. You're allowed to say no. I'm saying no. Owen turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table. But I want him to hear something from me. Through you. On the record, if that's possible. Alcott took out a pen. Tell him this, Owen said. He doesn't get to be a victim in this story. He wasn't tricked. He wasn't confused. He was a grown man who sat across from a married woman for 2 years while she talked about how her husband could die, and he never once picked up a phone. He didn't have to plan it. He just had to not care. That was enough. He helped destroy my family, and he doesn't get to hand that back by feeling bad about it now. Alcott wrote it down and read it back, and Owen nodded once. Grant Kessler accepted responsibility for his part. He said so in a courtroom, in a low voice, and he did not look at Owen when he said it, and Owen did not need him to. Vivian never accepted anything. Not once. Not in any room. Not in any version of the story she told. That was, in the end, the clearest difference between the two of them. Grant was a weak man who had done something monstrous, and eventually could not carry it. Vivian was not carrying anything. She never had been. She called him in January, from a number he didn't know. Owen was in his kitchen. The house was already emptier. Her side of the closet stood open and bare, and a rectangle of unfaded paint marked where a mirror had hung for 9 years. He almost didn't answer. Then he thought about the recorder app on his phone, and he tapped it, and he picked up. Don't hang up, Vivian said. He said nothing. I know you're there. I can hear the fridge. A small, shaky laugh. That fridge has been dying for 3 years. Silence. Owen. Her voice dropped into the register he'd been married to. Soft, low, intimate. The one she used to use in the dark. I still love you. I've never stopped. Whatever you believe about me, I need you to know that part was true. He looked out the window at the backyard. The grill was under a tarp for winter. The patio he'd poured, bag by bag. I know I made terrible choices, she said. I'm not asking you to forget them. I'm asking for 10 minutes. Just you and me. No lawyers, no family, nobody watching. Let me explain everything. Owen finally spoke. You've had a year to explain. She started crying then. Not the courtroom crying, the tight, controlled kind. This was louder and less shaped, and it went on long enough that a younger version of him would have been across town by minute 2. I was scared, she said. You weren't scared when you lied. You don't understand what I was going through, Owen. You don't. You were never home. You were at that plant 14 hours a day, and I was in that house alone with the walls, and I got sick in my head. I got genuinely sick, and Grant, stop. Grant put things in my head. He pushed, and I was too weak to Vivian. Owen's voice stayed completely level. I understand exactly what you were doing. She went quiet. Not what happened to you, he said. What you were doing. You were doing it at the hotel when you held my hand in the lobby. You were doing it when you told that clerk I was the best husband in the world. You were doing it on the phone with my mother. You're doing it right now. That's not. You want 10 minutes with no lawyers and nobody watching, Owen said. You know what that is? That's you asking for a room where the only person keeping score is me. You've never lost in a room like that. The crying stopped very suddenly. That was the thing he thought about afterward. Not gradually. Like a tap. So that's it, she said. Flat now. A different woman's voice entirely. 14 years, and you're just done. Yes. You're a colder man than anybody thinks you are, Owen Brandt. Maybe. You know what you are? He hung up. He set the phone on the counter and stood in his kitchen and listened to the refrigerator that had been dying for 3 years. There would be no reconciliation. No quiet meeting. No second chance. No coffee somewhere neutral. No long talk that ended with both of them older and wiser. He was finished, and being finished did not require an argument. The criminal case moved on its own track, slower than the divorce and heavier. Owen learned that a courtroom is mostly waiting. Waiting in hallways on hard benches. Waiting for a docket to move. Waiting while attorneys murmur at the bench about something you can't hear and won't be told. He went every day of it. He wore the same gray jacket. He sat in the second row and kept his hands folded and did not react to anything. The prosecution laid it out in order, the way Owen had learned to do everything now. The timeline of the affair. The Cleveland folio. The rental agreement. The registration for room 226 and the key card entries. The lobby footage. The messages, printed and projected, each one with its date and timestamp in the corner. The insurance policy, and the exact figure Vivian had typed from memory. Then the letter. They put it up large enough for the back row to read, and the examiner walked the jury through it line by line. The slant, the pressure, the way she formed a capital B, the 11 comparison samples. He was a dull, precise man, and he never once said the word guilty. He didn't need to. He put a birthday card to Owen's mother on the screen beside a plan for Owen's death, and let 12 people look at the same handwriting twice. Nora Vega testified again. She was steadier this time. Owen testified for 2 hours and 11 minutes. The defense attorney worked hard on him. He was asked whether he had been angry. He said yes. He was asked whether he had wanted revenge. He said he had wanted the truth, and that people usually assume those are the same thing. He was asked why he hadn't confronted his wife that night at the hotel. Owen was quiet for a second. Because I knew what would happen if I did, he said. She'd have cried, and I'd have apologized, and by morning I'd have believed I imagined it. That's how the last 14 years worked. The room was very still. Vivian took the stand against advice. Everyone in the building knew it was against advice. She was, for about 11 minutes, magnificent. She talked about the apartment on Sullivan Avenue. She talked about the serial dinners and the transmission and the hospital nights with Owen's father. She talked about a marriage that had gone quiet and a woman who had gotten lost in it. Then the cross-examination started, and the prosecutor did not raise his voice or chase her feelings. He just walked her through her own statements in order. You told investigators you had never been alone with Mr. Kessler. Then this. You told this court you never discussed your husband's death. Then this. You told your attorney the letter was fabricated. Then this. You told this court the letter was written years ago. This hotel stationery is 14 months old. Which of those 4 statements would you like to keep? She tried to answer around it. She tried to make the question the crime, the way she always had, and it did not work because the question wasn't coming from a husband who loved her. It was coming from a man with a folder. She cried. Nobody moved. For 14 years, tears had ended every conversation Vivian ever wanted ended. In that room, they were just weather. The prosecutor waited politely until she was finished and then repeated the question exactly as he had asked it. Owen watched her realize it. There was a moment, and he could name the second it happened, when Vivian looked out at the gallery and understood that there was no one in that room she could reach. Not one face she could work. Her mother wasn't looking at her. Bree had stopped coming after the second week. The friends who had left praying for you under her posts were not there, because sympathy is easy from a phone and hard from a hard bench at 9 in the morning. She had spent her whole life controlling people. She could not control a document. She could not control a timestamp. She could not control a key card log or a stationary order or a man who wrote down what he saw the night he saw it. And she could not control the truth, which had simply sat there the entire time, waiting for someone to stop being afraid of it. Grant Kessler was convicted for his part and sentenced to prison. Vivian was convicted and sentenced to prison. The charges and the sentences were determined by the court on the evidence, under the law, and Owen did not argue for more or less. When the sentence was read, he did not stand or speak or make a sound. He simply listened, the way he had listened to everything else. Someone behind him let out a breath. Vivian turned her head and found Owen in the second row. She held his eyes for a moment. Whatever she was looking for in his face, she did not find it because it had left him months earlier, quietly, on a stairwell landing beside a lake. The divorce was finalized in the spring, after the criminal case had run most of its course. It happened in a small courtroom on the 4th floor with radiators that ticked. 10 minutes of docket and paperwork. 14 years of a life reduced to a judge confirming that both parties had been properly served. Vivian was brought in for it. She looked smaller. Her hair was pulled back plainly, and there was gray in it that she'd never allowed before. And her face, without the work she used to do on it, was just a tired woman's face, 41 years old, sitting in a room she couldn't charm. When the paperwork was done, she turned to him. "You really won't forgive me?" Owen looked at her. He thought about answering fully. He thought about telling her that forgiveness would have been a door, and doors go both ways, and he had spent a year learning how to build a wall that didn't need one. "No," he said. She lowered her head. That was all. He walked out through the double doors and down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was full, and out into a bright, cold Ohio morning with traffic going by on Front Street and pigeons on the courthouse steps and the whole indifferent city carrying on. He stood there for a minute with his hands in his pockets. He had expected grief. He had braced for it the way you brace for a wave you can see coming. What he felt instead was quieter and stranger. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was the feeling of setting down something you've carried so long that your arms have forgotten the shape of empty. The house would be sold or divided according to the court's orders. He already knew he wouldn't keep it. The rest was logistics. The furniture, the dishes his aunt gave them, the good pans. He'd already found the photographs, weeks earlier, going through a closet. For albums and 2 shoeboxes. Their wedding. The apartment. A trip to the Smokies in a year when they had no money and went anyway. He hadn't burned them. He thought about it for maybe 5 seconds and then felt embarrassed for thinking about it. He put them in a box, taped it, wrote a year on the side, and set it on a shelf in the garage. 14 years of marriage became a box, a case number, and a set of orders on a judge's docket. But he had survived it. He kept coming back to that in the days after. Not one. Survived. She had sat down with a pen and planned an ending for him, and he was standing on the courthouse steps in the sunshine with his whole life still in front of him. And she was not. That was the entire scoreboard, and it was enough. In September, Owen drove back to Michigan. He couldn't have explained why to anyone who asked, and nobody asked, because there was nobody left in his life who would have. He got in the truck on a Friday and drove 6 hours with the windows down. The hotel looked exactly the same. White clapboard, green shutters, rocking chairs on the porch that nobody was using because the wind was up. The lake beyond it, gray and moving, throwing that same cold smell of wet stone up the bluff. He parked and sat for a moment before going in. The lobby fire was lit. The floors still creaked. And behind the front desk, in a blazer instead of a housekeeping uniform, stood Nora Vega. She saw him and stopped what she was doing. "You came back," she said. Owen smiled. It surprised him how easily it came. "I wanted to." She came around the desk. She looked older than she had a year ago, but not in a bad way. Steadier. Someone had promoted her, and it showed in the way she stood. "They moved me to the desk in March," she said, following his eyes. The manager knew what happened. He said anybody who could stand up in a courtroom like that could handle a front desk. He's right. I almost quit, you know. After. For a month I couldn't walk down the second-floor hallway. She shook her head. Then I figured I wasn't going to let it take my job on top of everything else. They walked out onto the porch. The wind pushed at them, and Nora tucked her hands into her sleeves. She looked at him carefully, the way she had on the landing. "Are you okay?" she said. "Really? Owen looked out at the water. A freighter sat far out on the horizon, so slow it seemed painted there. Better than I was, he said. And he thought about Vivian. She had built her whole defense out of other people's opinions. She had believed that being adored was the same as being safe. She had believed that a room full of sympathy could outvote a piece of paper. She had believed that tears would work forever because they had always worked before, on everyone, especially on him. She had been wrong about all of it. Her affair ended her marriage. Her lying ended her name on that street. The neighbors who defended her stopped saying anything at all, which is what people do when they've been embarrassed. Her endless changing stories ended whatever the court might have given her. And the thing she wrote down in her own hand on hotel stationery ended her freedom. Every wall she'd spent 14 years building fell in the same direction, and it fell on her. Owen did not celebrate that. He wasn't built for celebrating it, and there was nothing in it to celebrate. He had loved her. He had genuinely loved her, and no amount of what she'd done erased that he had, and no amount of having loved her made him want her back. He hadn't put her where she was. She had walked there herself, step by step, writing the directions down as she went. "I never said thank you," Owen said. "Properly." Nora shook her head. "You don't have to." "I do." "You had nothing to gain. You could have thrown that envelope in the cart and gone home and never thought about it again, and nobody in the world would have known." He looked at her. "You knew it could cost you your job, and you did it anyway. I've been alive 43 years. I can count on one hand the people I've met who'd have done that." Nora looked at the boards of the porch for a second. "You poured her coffee first," she said. "I kept thinking about that." They stood there a while longer, not talking, watching the water go dark at the edges. Then Owen thanked her again and shook her hand and drove home. He bought a smaller house that fall, on the east side, in a quiet neighborhood where the trees were older than the mortgages. 2 bedrooms, a single-car garage, a back step instead of a patio. The furnace was 20 years old, and the kitchen faucet dripped, and Owen fixed the faucet the first weekend because that was who he was and always had been. He unpacked slowly. There was no rush and nobody waiting. In the last box, near the bottom, wrapped in a sock the way he'd left it, was his wedding ring. He hadn't worn it since October. He'd taken it off in the truck outside Bree's house and put it in the glove box and later moved it to a drawer, and it had traveled from house to house without him deciding anything about it. He held it in his palm for a while. Plain gold, worn thin on the inside, a scratch across the top from a job site years ago. He didn't throw it away. He thought about it. Dramatic, clean, the kind of thing people do in movies. He decided against it, and the reason mattered to him. He wasn't keeping it for her. There was nothing of her in it anymore. He was keeping it for the man who had put it on at 29 years old and meant every word he said that day. A man who worked nights in a warehouse and never mentioned it. A man who apologized for asking fair questions because he couldn't stand to hurt someone he loved. A man who trusted completely, gave every chance, and got lied to for it. That man wasn't a fool. Owen had decided that, finally, somewhere around the 4th hearing. That man was just decent, and decency isn't a weakness. It's only a weakness when you hand it to someone who's counting on it. He put the ring in a small wooden box on the closet shelf and closed the door. He would never forgive her. He was clear-eyed about that, and he never pretended otherwise, not to his mother, not to the counselor he saw for 6 months, not to himself. Some things you don't forgive. You just stop letting them steer. Because that was the real change, and it had nothing to do with courtrooms. Vivian no longer controlled his emotions. She didn't get to make him apologize, or doubt what he'd seen, or check his own memory against her version of it. She didn't control his reputation. That had been the hardest to give up. For months, he'd wanted to explain himself to everyone who'd unfriended him, and stopped waving. Then one day, he simply stopped wanting to. People who need the whole file before they'll believe you are not people whose opinion should cost you sleep. She didn't control his future. He picked the house. He picked the street. He picked what time he came home. His mother came for dinner in November. She sat at his small table and didn't say much at first. She'd been through her own year with it. Somewhere in the middle of the criminal case, she had stopped calling him and started calling every day, and neither of them had ever discussed why. Near the end of the meal, she put her fork down. "I should have believed you," Ellen said. "You didn't know?" "That's not the same thing." Her hands were folded on the table, old and spotted, and steadier than her voice. I heard her cry and I picked her. I picked her over my own son. I've thought about that every night for a year. Owen reached across and put his hand over hers. Mom, he said, she was better at it than both of us. That's all it was. They didn't talk about it again after that. They didn't need to. On an evening in early December, Owen stood on his back step with a cup of coffee and watched the sky go orange behind the roofline. The neighborhood was quiet. A kid was riding a bike in circles at the end of the block. Somebody 2 yards over was running a leaf blower and then stopped. His phone sat inside on the counter, silent. No calls. No arguments waiting for him behind the door. No performance to sit through at dinner. No question he wasn't allowed to ask. No woman studying his face to see how much she'd need to cry tonight. Just silence and the cold coming up through the step and the coffee going lukewarm in his hands. And standing there, Owen finally understood the thing he'd been circling for a year. The best revenge was never about destroying the people who betrayed you. He hadn't destroyed anyone. He had simply told the truth once, carefully, to the right people, and then stepped back and let her own handwriting do the rest. The best revenge was building a life she could never reach again. Vivian had spent 14 years making sure the whole world remembered her as the perfect wife. In the end, the world remembered her as exactly what she was, and it was her own words, in her own hand, that told them. And Owen? He finished his coffee. He went inside. He turned on the porch light, because it was 7 o'clock, and that was how he'd wired it. He didn't forgive her. He never forgot a single thing she'd done. He simply refused to give her one more day of his life.